Yeah, one of the reasons I like being in Texas, I don't feel I talk quite so funny. I did want to take a moment just to, I think it's my duty to correct SK. And I'm sorry, SK, I might hear about this at lunch. But he said when he's angry, he doesn't speak. I think what he really meant to say was when he's angry, he doesn't speak for about 5 seconds. So on the picture here, the common word between the pictures is great. And that's what our mandate was for this morning that we were asked to talk about, provide some perspectives as to what makes a great international agricultural program. And this was Jim Hill, many of you will know him, and so we pulled these ideas together. So very briefly, I just want to build on what you said. Who am I? Originally from Australia. I spent time at CIMMYT, about 9 years, about 10 plus years at IRRI. I joined the governator when he first became governor. That's about the time that we moved to California. Then I joined UC Davis about 3 years ago. This is a picture of my wife. We met in Mexico. We married in Mexico. She was born in Houston, but she's not from the US. She's from Texas. If you know my father-in-law from Houston, that's really true. Finally, Jim Hill, as I mentioned, Jim Hill's my boss, and these ideas are pulled together with his help. I think the first thing about GREAT, the first thing that struck me was, well, whose perspective are we talking about? We have donors, we have home institutes, Texas, or whoever, wherever we are. We have a whole bunch of partners. It can be NGOs, it can be development organisations, in-country universities, etc. And then finally, of course, we have the whole beneficiaries, the actual people in country that we're trying to help. So I think when we're talking about greatness, we really have to think at the different elements. I think we probably often tend to think of home institute and donor, are we getting the money? But really greatness has to embrace all those different people. I put this picture up because when I was thinking about this whole thing of GREAT, this is the only rocket science you're going to see. Because there isn't a lot of rocket science in what makes a great institute. And I think we've heard really great insights this morning from Ed, Dr. Hussey, SK, etc. And we pulled together 4 key elements. Number 1, relevance with commitment. So what we're talking about here is that our institutional, like UC Davis experts, they have the relevant experience both in terms of commodities and the development circumstances. I think of a project that I was called to visit in Morocco a number of years ago, and it was being implemented by a group of really well-meaning people who had no idea. And what was interesting was that the local response of the national collaborators to that was, you know, I knew some of them very well, and I said, well, what are you doing in this circumstance? And they basically said, they're bringing the money, we ignore them. And it was a real sad statement on what was a very significant project. So I think that's a real key thing, because if you have that commitment, if you have that experience, that's what leads to quality. When you've got the quality, that's what builds your reputation. The other challenge, and we've heard, but there's a challenge related to that, and I think we've heard various people talk about that, and it's commitment to international work versus advancement. I've heard this from many universities across the States, and it's like, well, I can either do this research and get a publication and advance, or I could spend time with you in a development activity. I think it's important. And so typically the publication will win, and it is a challenge. What we find, Dr. Louise Ferguson up in the top corner there, she's in the, how do I put this politely, twilight of her career. And she says that, you know, she's quite open about it. She says, I don't care about advancement anymore, I want to make a difference. And it's faculty members like Dr. Ferguson that really engage strongly with us and do a fantastic job. So that was the first point. The second point is you have a focal point. You know, second point to success for a great international ag program. Number 1, you've got relevance and commitment. Number 2 is you've got a focal point. Texas A&M, when we were asked to do this, we're going, why is Texas A&M asking us? You already have a very, very strong program. And Ed pointed this out this morning. You want to make strong stronger. That scares the bejeebies out of me. Do you have any openings? But it is a really key point. But associated with that is this whole issue of advocacy that we've heard people talk about this morning. Advocacy within the university, advocacy without, exterior, and having a strong leader who guides that process. Two really key elements of what's involved in a focal point. Number 3. Supported, and we've heard from Auburn University the challenges. Do you have a supportive institutional environment? We're very fortunate. I think many of you will know Neil Van Alphen, who was at Texas A&M for a while and is now the dean of our college. He's incredibly supportive of international programs. Fortunately, we have a new chancellor who is also she's made it one of the main pillars of UC Davis is to internationalise. We're very fortunate with that. Associated with that, that's all very well and good. Let's have a strong university. Let's do great stuff. But as we heard, you need the administrative support, and we are very fortunate. We had a contract the other day that we were told, you have 24 hours and we'll give you another $500,000. And they got it through in less than 24 hours. We heard of another university where they had months and they didn't get it through. So having that within the institute is tremendously important. So that's the third element. We've just have 4. The last one, and we've heard a lot about this, the whole issue of building a global network. I think back to a meeting that I was in Myanmar. Many of you know it as Burma. We were at a ministry meeting sitting around an office, and there's the general, who's the Minister of Agriculture, but then there are also all his associates. And as they went round, they all said, my name is, I studied at Ohio. I am such and such, I studied at Purdue. Every one of them had studied at a land grant. And you could tell the sense of pride that brought and the sense of commitment of wanting to work. So I really stress this. I think, Ed, you were talking about the numbers, 15,000 down to 2,000. I mean, it reminded me, you may know Dr. Mahabub Hossain, who's now CEO of BRAC, who worked at IRRI. He always used to say that when you develop that educational relationship, you have a friend for life. And I think that's what we're missing out by cutting down the number of students. So those are the 4 elements that we found. I just put in a picture of transplanting because I don't like transplanting. I like the picture. But there were a couple of other elements I just wanted to touch on. So those are sort of the elements that we see as required for success. Then we had some other things that we want to see when we engage. Number 1, obviously, is consistency with mandate. And this comes to this whole extent of how downstream do you go. And I feel quite strongly about that. Having worked in the CG, I think we have to stay up in the capacity building, information, training, etc., technical advising. You know, how far down do you go? That's an institutional question you have to ask, but for us it's quite clear. Also, obviously, you're wanting to engage faculty, students, and partners. And I want to specifically mention this transparency of process when you engage with partners. And that, to us in Davis, is very, very important. That when you're engaging with other land grants, when you're engaging with organisations overseas, to what extent are we making that process transparent? The final thing that we like to see, we just got a project for Afghan agriculture. We want to see clear, doable outputs, and we want those clearly defined up front. And this project we just got in Afghanistan has that. It's really nice. A very clear audience, a very clear output, and a very clear thing that we can work towards. Thank you.